Life has been kind to me, or so I like to believe. At 37, I'm happily married and settled in what many would call a charmed existence. My husband, Mason, and I have built a life that, on the surface, looks seamless. We complement each other in ways that seemed almost too perfect when we first met. But as I sat in the elegant lobby of a boutique hotel, surrounded by muted luxury, Mason's words took on a sharpness that pierced the calm. He leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his tone anything but. You know, he began with a sly grin, my new wife is the daughter of the president of Goldsmith Enterprises. The declaration hung in the air, heavy with the pride he seemed eager for me to notice. His laughter, light yet laced with condescension, echoed softly in the polished room, turning heads briefly before fading into the hum of distant conversations. For a moment, I was taken aback. Goldsmith Enterprises. The name tugged at the edges of my memory, familiar yet elusive. Then, it clicked, and the irony was too rich not to savor. Mason, however, remained blissfully unaware of my amusement, too caught up in his self-satisfied monologue. Allow me to introduce myself, my name is Patricia. At 37, I'm living a life that blends personal contentment with professional ambition. I work in my family's real estate business, overseeing administrative operations. My father, the president of the company, takes charge of the big-picture strategies. As his only child, the unspoken expectation is clear, I am the heir apparent, destined to take over the company one day. The weight of this future doesn't burden me as much as one might think. Over the years, I've mastered the delicate balancing act of keeping my professional aspirations separate from my personal life, particularly around Mason. He completed high school and works tirelessly at a moving company, a job that demands physical strength and long hours. I admire his work ethic, even if the gap in our educational and professional experiences sometimes feels like an unspoken chasm between us. To avoid making him feel inadequate, I rarely discuss my university degree or my anticipated future as the president of our company. Mason doesn't know much about the intricacies of my work, nor does he need to. He's content with the version of me he sees, and I've learned to let that be enough. We met through a mutual friend during my college years. It was an introduction born out of chance. A moving job Mason's company handled for her led to a friendly connection that shifted my world. At first, Mason's interest had been directed at her, but when she gently turned him down, he and I found ourselves drawn to each other. His easygoing charm was a balm to my sometimes overly meticulous nature. What started as casual conversations turned into a deep bond. By our late 20s, we were married after a whirlwind courtship. Our life together began smoothly, marked by the warmth and acceptance of Mason's parents. Their kindness was a refreshing contrast to the tales of in-law drama I often heard from my friends. Mason's unwavering dedication to our marriage made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Even after grueling workdays, he'd come home with a smile, grateful for the small acts of love I offered, like waiting up to share dinner with him. But as the months turned into years, the quiet rhythm of our life together began to shift. Subtle at first, the changes grew more pronounced, until one night shattered the fragile equilibrium we'd maintained. We were lying in bed, the comforting glow of a bedside lamp casting soft shadows across the room, when Mason brought up the topic of children. His words came out of nowhere, startling me. "We've been married for a year," he said, his voice carrying a trace of irritation. "Shouldn't we be trying for a baby by now?" I blinked, caught off guard by both the timing and the tone. I had thought about starting a family too, but I believed it would happen naturally, in its own time. "It's only been a year, Mason," I said, my tone calm. "There's no rush." But Mason wasn't satisfied. His frustration simmered beneath the surface as he pressed on. "You know, there's about a 90% chance of conceiving within a year for couples who aren't using contraception," he said, his voice clipped. The statistic surprised me. I wasn't familiar with such specifics, but his urgency felt misplaced. "If you're worried, maybe we should both get tested," I suggested, hoping to turn the conversation into a constructive dialogue. Instead, my words struck a nerve. "What are you implying? That it's my fault?" His voice rose, edged with contempt. I stared at him, stunned by the sudden hostility. I didn't mean it like that, I said, keeping my tone steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. I just think it's something we could do together to make sure everything's okay. But Mason's mind was made up. It's usually the woman's fault, he said bitterly, his words cutting deeper than he realized. It's definitely the woman's fault. I lay there in silence, the weight of his accusation pressing down on me. It was the first time he'd spoken to me with such coldness, and it felt like a crack in the foundation of everything we'd built together. The sight of Mason standing confidently with his arm draped over Diana ignited a twinge of discomfort I couldn't ignore. He practically radiated pride, not just in his newfound status but in the fact that he had married someone much younger and connected to wealth and power. His smug grin, paired with her condescending smirk, set the stage for what was bound to be an unpleasant exchange. "You're here alone? That's sad," Mason sneered, his voice laced with disdain. He seemed to relish every word, his tone a mix of mockery and pity. Beside him, Diana's sharp voice cut in, her smirk deepening as she looked me up and down. "Hey, Mason, is this your ex-wife? She looks old. Hurry up with the check-in," she said dismissively, as though I were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Annoyance bubbled within me, but I kept my composure, refusing to stoop to their level. Mason, sensing my irritation, seized the opportunity to boast. "Yeah, I'm set for life now," he said, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "Marrying into money, best decision ever. Meanwhile, you're stuck struggling in your modest little life." His high-pitched laugh shattered the serene ambience of the lobby, echoing off the polished floors. The juxtaposition between his grating voice and the peaceful setting wasn't lost on me. "Diana's the daughter of Goldsmith," Mason continued, puffing out his chest as if her name alone was a trophy. "You know, Goldsmith Enterprises?" He practically purred the name, soaking in his perceived superiority. The name tugged at my memory, and recognition flickered. Goldsmith Enterprises, of course. My lips twitched in an almost imperceptible smile as Mason prattled on, oblivious to the irony of his words. "Impressive, huh? Her family's loaded. They even paid off our house mortgage within a month of us getting married. Honestly, Patricia, thanks for making the divorce so easy for me," he added, his sarcasm biting. Feigning disinterest, I responded calmly. "Goldsmith Enterprises? Oh, you mean that big building downtown? I've been there a few times." Mason's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise breaking through his smug facade. "You've been there? Huh, didn't expect that. Well, breaking up with you was the smartest thing I ever did," he said, his words barbed with malice. Maintaining an air of serenity, I replied, "Oh, that building? It's part of our real estate holdings." Both Mason and Diana froze, their confusion evident. "What do you mean, your real estate holdings?" they asked in unison, the synchronized disbelief almost comical. Leaning back slightly, I let the words roll off my tongue with deliberate ease. "It's simple, really. My father owns that building. He purchased it a few years ago for about $500 million. It's one of the flagship properties in our portfolio." Their silence was telling, but I wasn't done. "Goldsmith Enterprises rents office space there. My father mentioned recently that one of our tenants was behind on rent. Turns out, it's your company, 4 months overdue, to be precise." Diana's laughter came abruptly, brittle and disbelieving. "That's ridiculous. Our company is doing great," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her unease. Realizing words alone wouldn't suffice, I pulled out my phone and called my father. "Dad, I'm here with the daughter of Goldsmith Enterprises. Could you send me the rent reminder notice?" Within moments, a notification pinged on my phone. I opened the document and turned the screen toward Mason and Diana. The evidence was irrefutable, 4 months of unpaid rent, with a clear ultimatum at the bottom. "See for yourselves. If this isn't resolved soon, we'll have no choice but to escalate legally. What's your plan?" I asked, my tone steady and unyielding. Diana's confidence crumbled further. "Now that you mention it," she mumbled, "Dad has been stressed. He's been talking about slow sales, layoffs, even firing employees." Mason, however, descended into angry denial. "You're lying," he barked, his voice growing louder with each word. "You're trying to trick us, trying to sabotage my new life. You're bitter and jealous, Patricia, that's all this is." His accusations stirred old wounds, but I refused to let him see the hurt. Standing firm, I met his gaze with calm resolve. "What are you even saying, Mason? Do you honestly believe I'd waste my energy on you? I'm not the one clinging to the past. Let me be clear, I'm not jealous. If anything, I feel sorry for Diana. She doesn't know what she's in for. Mason's face darkened with anger, his composure unraveling. You're just an old hag, can't get married again, can't have kids. Diana and I are planning to have a baby right after this trip. I held his gaze, a small smile playing on my lips. Oh, I didn't mention, I'm 5 months pregnant. The room seemed to still, Mason's jaw dropped, and Diana's smug demeanor dissolved into shock. After our divorce, I continued, I met someone who truly supports me. We married last year, and my father hosted a grand celebration. My husband is not only my greatest supporter but also a trusted partner in our business. When we found out about the baby, my father insisted I take this trip to relax. Mason's voice cracked as he stammered, You're pregnant? Were you using birth control before? The absurdity of his question nearly made me laugh. Mason, my life has moved on. I suggest you do the same. With that, I stood, offering a brief nod before turning to leave. Oh, and about that overdue rent, I added without looking back. You might want to remind your father-in-law before things get messy. As I walked away, their stunned silence followed me, the weight of reality finally settling on their shoulders.